In the first part of this adventure, we tried to study. This is the second part of a two-part series, so if you're watching this without having seen part 1, go watch it now. The Bibites is a very complex artificial life simulation, and in the first part, I give a lot of initial information and define a lot of the core concepts. So if you don't watch it first, this video will make absolutely no sense to you. So good, now that everyone is on the same page, welcome to the fascinating world of the Bibites. Last time, we left at the 50 hours mark of the simulation and had a pretty interesting situation. On the same island, we had Rozoculi rigidcutis and Rozoculi infensus, two related species competing against one another using two very different strategies. So, let's fast forward 10 more hours and see what happens. The first thing I notice is that I don't see any more flashy green Bibites in our southern island. Ouch. I have a save file from 62 hours in, and it looks like the Rozoculi infensus species started taking over the island, and the rigidcutis numbers were dwindling. But 5 hours later, they were all gone. Instead, a swarm of rigidcutis lookalikes with higher defense filled the island. It looks like defense ended up being the best strategy after all. So, as I promised, it's time to draw the prize. Anyone who guessed something close to rigidcutis outcompete infensus was right. But still, there can only be one winner, so... Congratulations!
Sample test.
Just send me an email with proof that this is your account, and I'll award you with your prized Discord key. Moving on, those new guys will get the name Rozoculi victoris, in celebration of their victory. Alongside Victoris, we have these new guys that seem to have perfected their defense even more. They look like they are indeed descendants from rigidcutis, confirming that the infensus lineage has been wiped out. Because of their tankiness, we'll give them the name Rozoculi durum testa, for hard-shelled pink eye. Both present species are similar in a lot of ways, and things might get messy in the future when trying to track how they evolve. So I'll try to just focus on a few differences. Namely, they share this same brain structure. But while Victoris has a negative connection that makes it turn away from blue pheromones, durum testa's connection is positive and makes him turn toward blue pheromones. Additionally, Victoris has an additional connection here on the bottom that stimulates that famed useless immune neuron. In fact, those kind of useless features are very useful hints for tracking lineages. After all, there's very little evolutive pressure that would impact those features aside from the random genetic drift. And since we know how likely mutations are, it's easy to determine how things are likely to change. This ties in nicely to the concept of molecular clock that biologists and paleontologues use to determine how long ago two species radiated from each other's. It's based on the fact that if we have a predictable mutation rate, we can simply count the number of individual mutations and divide the two to get an approximate time of divergence. We can't do that easily in our simulation because the genes are continuous values instead of discrete letters. If the value of a gene is different, there's no real way to tell how many mutations caused that difference. If we try doing that for our two here, we can compare their gene and see that they seem to have 13 genes that differ. With that many mutations, it would be pretty unlikely that no mutation ever targeted the same gene as the previous one. In fact, thanks to that one statistic class I took like 8 years ago, I'm able to tell you that the probability of that happening is approximately 3.5%. However, if we want to try and determine the most likely actual numbers of mutations, we can, Well, a freak here has a PhD in statistics, so I'll trust this formula even if it makes absolutely no sense to me. The answer is 18. And now, using the molecular clock theory, we can determine that with 18 mutations between two individuals and our expected amount of mutations per generation, their lineages diverged approximately 11 generations ago. So, nice. I decided to write a wiki page on the subject and uploaded a nice table that makes it so that you never will have to go through the same ordeal as I did. Just count the number of different genes and check the most likely number of mutations. Moving on from the 6 hours I just lost and will never get back, on our eastern island we still have the Rozoculi ostis thriving, but a new species seem to have taken hold. They are still somewhat greenish, and a detailed brain and genetic analysis seem to indicate that they are descendants from our previous Rozoculi ostis population. They have a lot of key differences and look quite different, so I think we will create a new genus for them. Puer novus, for the new boy in town, should do the trick. Sadly, it looks like the Inutulus stultum species from the last study have become extinct, which is very sad because they had kinda grown on me. On the western island, we previously had 3 different species of the Inutulus genus, but now the scene is very different. We have individuals that look a lot like our new Puer novus. In fact, one of the species is nearly identical, indicating that they migrated very recently. However, we have another species here that looks a lot like it is from the Puer genus. Because of their color, we'll name them Puer aureum, for golden boy. The island is still incredibly fertile and allows the growth of some true giants. This individual from the Puer novus species is very old and has grown to an impressive size. He drives across the center of the island and mows down the plants, continuously gulping them down. There's also these little guys that are descendants from one of the Unus multum, and also the last living member of the Inutulus genus. However, they do produce some nice pheromones, as long as they are alive. As I specified in the last video, the production of pheromones often develops in cycle. In this case, the species seem to have started to evolve a use for these pheromones, as certain members of the species have started to develop the capacity to sense the green pheromones in their environment, which then slows down their growth. I might be wrong on this one, but this might be an example of autocrine stimulation. Basically, when an individual produces signal molecules that it then detects itself to produce a change in behavior. In fact, you can see this as just another regular connection. The Bibites could have evolved this for the same result. However, the key difference is that this will also result in paracrine stimulation, where the signals an organism produces induce a change in others. Among themselves, the effect will be small since their pheromone sensing gene is relatively low, resulting in a small sensing radius. But this means that the species as a whole will tend to grow slower when they spend more time closer to one another. This might have a regulatory purpose inside the species, making them slow their growth when they are too numerous. However, I now notice that all the other species of the island are able to sense green pheromones too. In the case of the Puer genus, they all have a negative connection between the smell of green pheromones and their desire to eat. And they do have a pretty high sensing gene, making them very sensitive to the presence of pheromones. However, they also have a positive connection from their H neuron toward the same stimulus, which counteracts any effects of the pheromone past a certain time. Almost like they are disgusted by the smell when they are young, but learn to overcome it as they grow up. As it seems like a pretty detrimental trait, the most likely hypothesis that I have is that they evolved that connection randomly before any green pheromones were present in the ecosystem. This provided an opportunity for evolution to make use of that trait, which these seem to have done wonderfully. It's very much possible that they managed to prevent being wiped out thanks to this adaptation, making the babies from the Puer genus starve to death if they are too close, allowing them to keep a good footing on the island. It is unclear how long this will last, as the Puer family now faces an evolutive pressure to get rid of that trait, but it might also be too small an effect to have much impact and will possibly stick around. The only way to know for sure is to let things play out and study the subsequent developments. For this, I'll name them Inutilus Ronsens, for smelly useless. So, moving on to 70 hours in, and now things are getting crazy. I'll just show you around and then tell you the conclusions. Basically, the Bibites have become too good at migrating. Their big size allows them to tough the journey and survive easily. As a result, things have become a mess and are very hard to keep track of. I won't be as detailed, but in short, all the remaining species as of now are descendants of the two we previously had on the southern island. Rozoculi victoris was wiped out from the southern island, but first managed to migrate and colonize the other two. Instead, in the southern island, the only species I can identify is this one, descendants from Durum testa. It has increased its defense gene even more, up to the maximum value. They'll get the name Rozoculi armatis, for armored pink eye. Notably, on the eastern island, we have this species that I'll name Rozoculi bellus, for cute pink eye, because look at them. Their wide field of vision allows them to have a very good awareness of their surroundings, and will almost always be able to find their way back if they accidentally venture into the void. Funnily, now that I look back, it seems like all the species that managed to migrate had not evolved incredible vision. This may give us the indication that having a good vision makes you less likely to migrate and colonize another island. Yes, you would have an easier time finding one while traversing the void, but you would be less likely to venture out in the first place. Again, just a theory. And on the western island, we have this species that will get the name Rozoculi evorsor, for destroyer pink eye, because it wiped out all the previous native species of the island by itself. Puer novus, Puer aureum, and Inutilus ronsens have all disappeared. We'll never know what kind of events could have developed from the pheromone dynamics we wanted to study there. The incredibly complex and dynamic environment we had was replaced by this uniform and quite bland scene. A grim demonstration of the dangers of invasive species. This means that Rozoculi is now the only genus of the simulation, and has been continuously outcompeting all the other genuses. I don't know why this is the case, as technically all species of all islands should have a similar probability of migrating and being better than the native population. One possibility is that the color selector that we placed initially on the southern island is the culprit. Maybe, and that's a big maybe, the color selector, eliminating some individuals from time to time, created a harsher environment that promoted evolution and competition, making the individuals evolve a little bit faster. Even with a small difference, this could explain what we are observing. But as with everything life-related, we can never know, only theorize. I would create a new genus amongst the new species, but I get the feeling that this will keep happening regardless. So let's throw in the towel and accept that Rozoculi is going to stay the only genus in the simulation from now on. 80 hours in, things stayed pretty much the same. Most species have started to become as big as possible, as it looks like size is encouraged. After all, it allows you to be more competitive, to better defend against attacks, and allows you to gulp down food faster.
On the southern island, the species didn't change much, aside from getting bigger, and I'm quite tired of this appearance, so we'll name them Rozoculi idem semper, which means always the same pink eye.
We also have the first species that reached the maximum size gene at 2.5. As a comparison, these were the giants 50 hours ago. Their size is massive. They are descendants from Rozoculi bellus, so I'll name them Rozoculi megabellus for cute giant pink eye. And side by side with megabellus, we have these ones that are descendants from Quidagis, which I now realized I forgot to mention, but was itself a descendant of Durum testa and not very interesting. They also happen to evolve the same eyes as megabellus. However, they also evolved high strength and spikes in their mouth, which makes them a little scarier looking. For this reason, they will get the name Rozoculi fictus bellus, for fake cute pink eye. And finally, on our western island, these guys here started looking dumb again. Our very first Rozoculi stultus, stupid pink eye, in honor of the past species that we remember dearly. 90 hours in, and, well, things look a lot more uniform. Every species was wiped out again by our Bibites from the southern island that migrated and made all the previous species extinct on all islands. Again, reinforcing our theory that the Bibites that develop in the southern island are just built different.
I'm built different.
They are now all heavily armored, having maxed out their defense gene, which looks like a worthwhile strategy. In addition to making them resistant to attacks and collisions, defense also increases their mass and makes them harder to be pushed around by others. In these small spaces, it is a very good advantage to have. In fact, defense might be a little too OP, so I might add a few settings in the future to try and balance them. But for now, this is the system we have. At this point, the same species seemed to be on every island, seeming to indicate that this colonization was relatively recent. For this reason, we'll get the name Rozoculi vindex for champion pink eye. The only Bibite looking a little different are these ones, which we'll name Rozoculi dissimilis for different pink eye. And finally, 100 hours in. And I have to say that I'm very proud that I managed to pause the simulation at the exact time. At this point, I have absolutely no idea how the lineages work out. Things are very messy and my head hurts when trying to compare the brains and genes between species. I mean, look at this. Still, we'll do a final tour of the species that are present. We have these mean-looking guys we'll name Rozoculi mendicus, for mean pink eye, and on our eastern island, oh my god, look at those cuties with their very wide field of view. I think the name Rozoculi pulcher for handsome pink eye is perfect. I think this one is worth a like on this video, don't you? At their side, we have these guys that look a lot like the Rozoculi fictibellus we had a while ago. So I think Rozoculi impostor for, well, imposter pink eye is good enough. And finally, to the west, these guys are the final champions of size. They are very big, maximizing their size gene, and very slow. They'll gain the name Rozoculi magnum for greater pink eye. They all look like they feed in a similar manner, by doing these wide swipes across the islands. Being this big, they have the inertia to ram through the plants and eat as many as possible. This reminds me of how some whales feed, except with plants instead of krill. It is a very beautiful dance, and I think that I could get lost looking at it for hours. if I didn't have a video to finish. So, sheesh! That was a lot. Look at where we started from, and all of that we went through. This tree took me so much time to do and gave me so many headaches, and even then I pretty much gave up in the end. But I think that this was very much worth it. We learned so much about the different dynamics that played out, and gained a much deeper understanding of the evolutive pressures our different species faced through the ages. And while it was a lot of fun, I think that in the future I should probably implement a few tools in the simulation directly to help out in characterizing the Bibites and drawing up that genealogy tree. We'll see. For the ones that didn't know already, one of my collaborators, Alex, recently put up a public repository that holds Bibites, save files, mods, and settings configuration that you can download. You can also submit your own submissions with a form that's linked on the main post. The most recent version of the project also has a link to that GitHub page right there. And finally, for the end of this video, I have something big to announce. I'm going to be organizing a Bibite Tournament. Every one of you, the community, will be able to submit a species that you either evolved in your simulation or engineered yourself. We'll then test all the competing species against each other, one at a time, in 1 versus 1 combat, and see which one makes the most babies and is the most numerous after a given period of time. I think it's going to be a fun event and will make for a very interesting video. I provided a link in the description as well as in the comments for the details of this event. Please participate if you're interested. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you don't want to miss this next video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and, really, please do so. It's one of the best ways to help the channel grow and let more people see this kind of stuff. So, thanks everyone who's been following the project for so long, and I hope to see you all next time.